and welcome to the Divorce Lab. We're a group of independent professionals working to help educate the public on various topics related to divorce. I am Carrie Goldring, a certified divorce lending professional who specializes in mortgage planning.
And I'm Mark Avezai. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. I work primarily in Troy, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Jim Chryssikos. I'm a family law attorney and mediator located in Troy, Michigan. So let's get started with today's show.
Hi, today we have with us Peter Bissett, who is a family law attorney, just like Jim. And both of you practice collaborative law, which is one way of going through the divorce process. And Peter, I thought maybe you can explain to our audience what is the difference between going the collaborative approach, or why would somebody choose that approach?
Sure. So thank you for having me today. And I'm happy to be here talking about collaborative divorce, which is my favorite part of my job. So really, collaborative divorce is an alternative to a traditional litigated divorce that really I find maps better onto what people are looking for from the process of their divorce. You know, people like the idea of it being as cooperative as possible. They like the idea of it not being very court oriented, not going in front of the judge all the time. Most of the time people like to avoid trial. And they like to have their values and priorities heard so that they reach a agreement in their case that maps well onto those values and priorities. And so collaborative divorce, I think, handles all those things really well by being kind of a team-based approach to reaching a settlement of a divorce case where, in a nutshell, you assemble a team and have a series of meetings. And through those meetings, you try to reach an agreement on all the issues of your case. And only then do you end up filing your case, as opposed to jumping right into filing a case and going through the litigation process.
Peter, I have a question. So as we've pointed out, I do collaborative divorce too as part of my practice. One of the key components, or the central component of collaborative, is, of course, the parties are making a commitment to resolving their case outside of the court process. In this collaborative process where we meet, we bring in neutral professionals and help them work through the issues, but it's all kind of centered around that commitment to resolving it out of court privately. When you describe that process to clients and that commitment to keeping it out of court, what's your take on how the clients react to that? Do they really love that concept? Are they reluctant? Are they skeptical? What do you get from your clients?
Yeah, so most of the clients that I talk to don't have, unless they've been through a divorce before, which, you know, is the case for some, but unless they've been through it before, they don't have a really strong concept of even kind of what to expect from the process. And so when I present the option of doing a collaborative divorce versus doing a traditional kind of litigated divorce, and present the option of saying, look, if you and your spouse are willing to make a commitment, and we reduce that commitment to an actual agreement, which we call the participation agreement, and everyone signs it. But we say, you know, if you're willing to buy into this process, then we are all going to buy into the idea that we are going to try to get you settled outside of court. And it's unusual that very unusual, I would say, that I talk to a client who really wants the court process, or says, you know, I mean, sometimes you'll get someone who says, you know, I want my day in court. But when you actually explain to them how divorce cases go, how they're resolved, how they're sometimes not resolved, which does result in a trial, very few people decide that they want to go to trial. And so it's a helpful kind of guide rail for everybody to know that everyone, both the professionals as well as the spouses, have made an actual written commitment to try this collaborative process and try to reach an agreement that way, which people generally are able to do. And then they do avoid a trial and all that. And I think are happy that they were able to do that.
When people say, I want my day in court, we get that once in a while as attorneys. I feel like what they're really saying is, I want to be heard. I want somebody to hear my story And I don't just want to jump over all of what's happened and jump right into, well, this is how we're splitting things up. It's like they need somebody to hear their story. And my feeling is, and I don't know if you feel the same, collaborative process is really ideal for somebody who wants to be heard, because we're meeting as a team. We're going to bring in neutrals, including often a mental health professional who's a coach, we call coach. And people get that open forum at meetings to say what's on their mind, to make sure that they're expressing themselves. And I think more than anything, having your day in court is having that opportunity, and collaborative really affords people that opportunity, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think you're right. I think that is what people are more getting at. And yeah, I mean, in all of my cases, whether it be a collaborative case or even a litigated case, or early stage mediation, however we decide to go at it, I always find that clients seem to like an approach where you start by identifying what their goals and values and priorities are, what really matters to them, and where they'd like to see this end up. And then you kind of work backwards from there. And of all the different ways I think that you could approach a divorce case, collaborative works best for kind of addressing, hearing, and honoring people's goals and priorities for how they want their divorce case to go. So it maps onto that really well. It's been it's been a revelation for me in my practice. I've been doing it a while now, but it's been a revelation, and I think it is for a lot of people as well. If they go through the collaborative process, they won't have known what it would have been like to go through it a different way. But generally, people end up feeling like that was closely linked to how they wanted this to go.
Right. We should have mentioned at the beginning, both Mark and Carrie are also collaboratively trained. So I want to get them in the discussion. Mark, why don't you kind of tell us from your perspective as a financial neutral in collaborative cases, how do you find the collaborative process?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a quick question before I
Sure.
jump in. So one of the things that I would be thinking if I was coming to either one of you guys is, hey, I'm interested maybe in doing this collaborative thing, right? It sounds like it might be up my alley, but my spouse, I'm not sure how that's going to work out, if they're going to be interested, and how do they get to an attorney who knows anything about this collaborative thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and that is often how it goes. Often I'll talk to the one spouse and they'll say, yes, I'm on board with that. How do I get my husband there? So, there is a spectacular website that the Collaborative Practice Institute of Michigan has, which is www.collaborativepracticemi. I believe it's org, I believe, isn't it, guys?
I will double check.
I always forget.
You're talking.
Yes, but so that is the website of the state body of collaborative practice. And all of us have served on that. Our members of that body have served on the board of that body, and it provides a very easy way to find professionals who you can speak to that would potentially be part of the team of your collaborative case. So I suggest to people that, it'd be a good idea to try to get your husband or wife to take a look at that website. And you can either, depending on the nature of where the relationship is, the dynamic of the relationship at that point, you can look at it together or point it to them. But oftentimes I just, try to encourage clients to approach their spouse where they're at and say, I think that we're both on board with an idea of as amicable and cooperative of a process as possible. We both want our needs to be met. We want our priorities and feelings to be heard. And, we both want to avoid a very, overly litigious process. And so I spoke with an attorney who does collaborative divorce, or with a financial professional or a mental health professional who participates in collaborative divorce. And they gave me this idea. Is this something that you're interested in? And if so, then they can go ahead and speak with an attorney that they find on that website and potentially have that attorney represent them. And then we assemble the team and we're good to go. But it does take both parties to be on board, and both parties to even be on board to the point where they say, yes, let's sign this agreement and let's engage in this process. But it's usually pretty closely linked to what people want. Maybe they don't know about it or haven't heard of it, but once they hear about it, it's very unusual for me to have someone say, yeah, that was nothing like they were completely uninterested or something like
Mhm.
that. So
Just to confirm that website, it's collaborativepracticemi.org.
thank
ORG.
you, Jim. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So that's CPIM, the Collaborative Practice Institute of Michigan's website. And yeah, it's a great jumping off point, both for anyone that any of us professionals talk to or their spouses.
I want to jump back to Mark and then to Carrie, because again, we want to get their perspective on the process since they participate in these cases as well. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit how you get into the process and what your role is in these types of cases?
Yeah, so from our perspective, typically, Jim, Peter, one of the attorneys on the case would reach out to us and say, "Hey, we have a collaborative case. Do you think you can join the team?" Right, and we try to help out wherever we can. In our perspective, dealing with collaborative, with mediation, with litigation, I would say these types of divorces are, in my personal opinion, the no divorce is really all that easy, but it is the easiest from my perspective on the family, on the separation, and if there's kids involved, usually on the kids, because a lot of times there's the discussion of, hey, what's important during this process, and a lot of times it's kid focused if there's kids involved, and so the whole team is trying to figure out the best way to put the kids in the best position possible, whether there's a lot of money that's being split or very little money. I have found it to be the best way for a lot of people to move forward, especially when they're unaware of it. So the other piece is when you have a financial neutral like myself, we collect all of the financial data, right? And as intelligent and smart as Jim and Peter are, they didn't go to school for math and numbers and tax returns and all of the nuances of everything financial and investment related.
You don't know that, but it's a lucky guess that you're right.
English major here, so
there you go.
guilty as charged.
So with us collecting all of the data, we are able to make sure there are no gaps in anything that we have. We're able to then go to both attorneys and say, hey, here's all of the information that's been collected. We can present that in one fashion to everybody. We can, bring Carrie in at the beginning of a conversation and say, hey, we need to do an analysis whether we're going to be able to keep the home. We need to potentially sell the home. We need to buy a new home. What are they going to qualify for? And so, we will always, when we can, bring Carrie in to have those discussions. So, Carrie, I'll pass it over to you and your perspective dealing with collaborative versus not.
Thank you. So what's nice about the collaborative process, like Peter has said, is that team approach. So you don't have this sneaky, don't tell my spouse this. Everybody's kind of working with the common goal. So a lot of times, you could have a couple scenarios, right? They could say, I'm going to sell my home and we're each going our own separate ways. Or one spouse wants to keep the home and the other one's going their separate way, which might be renting or purchasing. So I like to help the team in figuring out what those things look like. Is there support that's needed to make it happen for the family, for someone to stay in the home or for two people to move? What kind of money are we talking about if you sell? When do you get that money? Do you need your retirement account? Does that take a long time to come in? Does somebody need support or for child support, spousal support in order to qualify for a loan? So going through that process on top of looking at someone's credit report and seeing what liabilities someone has, are they shared liabilities? Are they individual? Is there anything negative that we need to work on improving credit first? Is there certain debt that needs to be worked into the agreement to go into someone else's name to be responsible to pay? So the wording in the settlement agreement is just as important as the planning. Which is why it's so nice to be part of the team, because then we can move the puzzle pieces as they need to go to make everything work out in the end.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think the key with getting Carrie involved early is sometimes it takes some runway to get somebody approved for a mortgage. So whoever's either refinancing the home or buying a new home and taking out a mortgage, Carrie gets us thinking about these things way in advance so that by the time they're ready to finalize the divorce or start their, whatever their post-marital arrangement is, they've already been thinking about it for a few months, and they're kind of going to have a softer landing and quicker landing.
yeah,
One
yeah.
thing you never want to say when I'm pre-qualifying someone is, oh, if your divorce decree was worded this way, you could do a mortgage now. But because it's worded this way,
Yeah,
you need to wait. So
absolutely.
the getting there ahead of time is definitely critical. Peter, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you guys are talking, just one of the major parts of collaborative divorce that's so different from a traditional case is, a traditional litigated case is very much kind of like person A versus person B, plaintiff and defendant. And so each team has their little camp or whatever. And I might have, I might be representing the wife, and I might be working with Mark on the financial aspects of it. I might be working with a particular mental health professional to advise me on how to approach the custody, blah, blah, blah. I might be working with Carrie on the issue of, can I help my client keep the house? But then on the other side is their spouse who's doing the same thing, who's working with a different person who's like Mark, and maybe a different person who's like Carrie, maybe a different mental health professional. But it's double the work. And it's very much kind of like the one team versus the other, where it's almost kind of like a zero-sum game. Whereas with collaborative divorce, you only have generally one Mark, one Carrie, and everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction. And it's not the adversarial way. It's it's a really kind of time-honored way in collaborative divorce to keep everybody on the same page by starting out by identifying what common goals and priorities are, and then remind people as time goes on, this was what we agreed we were all working towards. And then everyone who's part of the team is constantly kind of like focusing their approach and what they're doing through that lens of how do we reach these common goals. And that's just 180 degrees different than the way a
Right.
litigated case will
And then
generally
it's
go.
a good compromise of, well, if you give a little bit here, we can make this work, and you give a little bit here, we can make this work, as opposed to, I'm not doing that and I'm not budging. So yeah, and I know sometimes, like, Mark and I both have said, well, what if you pay for this car, but then you don't pay so much in support, and then we can get you to qualify because we take this debt off, and kind of work the numbers so everybody leaves at the best win-win humanly possible under this situation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The last piece of the puzzle that really isn't represented here is the mental health professional or coach. So Peter, I'll let you, I'll throw it to you. What do you think the benefit of having as a team member? We talked about a team, and generally you look at your screen, you're looking at the team. Usually you got two attorneys, a financial neutral, the parties, of course, sometimes a mortgage professional, depending on the case. And then usually there's a coach. So tell us a little bit about what the coach does and the benefit that they bring in your experience.
Yeah, so the coach, we keep referring to them as mental health professionals. So they're generally, a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist, and they're kind of the glue of the team in the sense that they're the ones who generally run meetings. They generally are the ones who kind of make sure that the dynamic of the team and of any given meeting is remaining kind of positive and headed in the right direction. And also they serve the role of generally being kind of like the point person when it comes to issues regarding the children and things like how we're going to divide up parenting time and things like that, because because of their profession, they're particularly well attuned to dealing with those issues, and they're neutral, just like the financial professional would be like Mark, just like a mortgage professional would be like Carrie. They're neutral. And so people buy into the spouses buy into their approach to how to handle things like parenting time with their kids more readily, because they know that that person is a neutral person. And again, that's, one of the kind of efficiencies that's created by this process is, that mental health professional who's working on the parenting time or custody issues is often doing that kind of offline, not during a meeting per se, but by meeting with maybe the husband, then the wife, maybe both of them, whatever it might be. And
But like in between the
in
greater team
between
meetings.
meetings. Yeah, exactly. So they can do a lot of work kind of on the side in between meetings, as can Mark, as can Carrie. And so, a good collaborative team is always paying attention to how to make sure that it's the process is being done as efficiently as possible, where we use people where they're most, we create entry points for the different professionals where they're most needed. We don't necessarily get everybody together on everything, but because we're trying to maintain that efficiency. But when the team is kind of working well that way, you get to a good result, and you do it in a pretty efficient manner.
One thing I noticed too with the mental health professional or the coach is that sometimes when you have people negotiating, right, for lack of a better word, to get this process taken care of, the person who doesn't understand or the person who feels overwhelmed has a tendency to dig their heels in a little bit deeper, be a little bit more argumentative. And I feel when you have the coach, they're in a great position to say, wait a minute, let's take a break, educate the person that needs the educating, or get them to the right person to do the educating, so that everybody can come back in a calmer fashion to get the results that are needed instead of a fighting environment.
Yeah.
I always like to think of the coach as like the obstacle remover, because every divorce has emotional obstacles to settlement. Maybe somebody is particularly sensitive to this particular issue, and we know when that comes up, it's going to be difficult to get through it. And coaches are really good at spotting those issues, and maybe removing them is the wrong word, but maybe sidestepping them a little bit, or coming up with a way of phrasing it where it's not going to be the trigger that it could have been. And so even in cases where maybe the parties don't have minor children, or maybe they've already settled their parenting time issues, and they say, well, we really don't need the coach because we're getting along, and we just need the settlement agreement. I always tell them, I said, look, every case is going to have issues where there's an emotional hurdle or obstacle we're going to have to overcome. That's where the coach comes in, along with what Carrie said. They kind of are that neutral person, and you, Peter, too. Kind of the captain of the ship in the meetings, kind of, if there's a mediator, there isn't a mediator in collaborative divorce, but if there were one, they would kind of be that mediator role where they're right in the middle, making sure everybody's hearing the same thing.
Correct. Well, Peter, it was great to have you. Thank you for being a part of our Divorce Lab podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm always happy to talk about collaborative divorce. I wish more people knew about it, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to us today. You can find us on the divorcelab.com. You can feel free to take a look at our other episodes, and you can also leave some questions or comments for us on there as well.